What if your entire life was a lie designed to protect a secret? As investigators moved from the cold floor of the Isdal Valley into the bustling hotels of Norway, they discovered that the woman wasn't just a traveler. She was a ghost. She checked into hotels under names that vanished as quickly as she did. She spoke in accents that shifted like the wind. But as the investigation pushed into the shadowed world of Cold War Europe, the mystery took a terrifying turn. Was she just a woman hiding from her past? Or was she a player in a game of global espionage, moving silently through a world where trust was a luxury no one could afford? If you are watching this right now, I want to ask you something. How much of history do you think is actually true? Because what you are about to hear was never meant to reach you. These are the classified files, the buried evidence, and the forbidden stories that powerful forces spent decades trying to erase. If you are someone who refuses to accept the official story, you are in the right place. Subscribe to the Dark History Files and join thousands of truth seekers uncovering what history tried to hide. Welcome back. This is the Dark History Files, and today we expose a truth that was never meant to be told. The investigation gradually spreads across Norway as detectives collect hotel registers, guest cards, and travel records from several cities connected to the unknown woman. Each document appears ordinary when examined alone, filled with names, dates, and brief signatures left by passing travelers. Yet as officers compare them side by side, a remarkable pattern begins to emerge. Different names appear alongside descriptions that seem to match the same woman, creating a trail that stretches far beyond the quiet valley where her story first captured attention. Following those records becomes an experience unlike the careful work carried out at the discovery site. Hotel lobbies carry the quiet sounds of arriving guests. Polished floors echo beneath measured footsteps, and reception desks preserve fading memories of conversations that once seemed entirely routine. Staff members search through old registers while detectives ask calm, patient questions about visitors from months before. Most recollections are uncertain, but together they create the feeling that someone had moved confidently through familiar public spaces while revealing almost nothing about herself. As interviews continue, the scattered pieces begin drawing closer together. Witnesses describe a woman who often traveled alone, checked into hotels under different names, and occasionally altered small details about her background. No single account appears extraordinary, yet each one adds another layer to a growing pattern of carefully managed identities. Detectives compare signatures, dates, and movements between locations, discovering that separate journeys may belong to one traveler whose official identity changes more frequently than her appearance. The investigation quietly shifts from isolated discoveries toward a connected timeline. The emerging picture challenges one of the simplest assumptions about personal identity. Most people leave behind consistent records that quietly confirm who they are as they move through everyday life. This woman seems to have done the opposite. Every destination preserved evidence that she had been there, yet each record introduced another version of her instead of bringing investigators closer to the truth. The trail across Norway becomes less like a straight path and more like a hall of mirrors, where every reflection resembles the same traveler while carefully refusing to reveal her real face. As detectives examined hotel records more closely, they discovered that the unknown woman had checked into several establishments under different names during her travels through Norway. Each registration appeared complete enough to satisfy routine hotel procedures, yet none could be confirmed as genuine. Addresses led nowhere. Personal details failed verification, and the identities dissolved when investigators attempted to follow them beyond the registration books. What had first appeared to be ordinary paperwork gradually became evidence of a carefully maintained system that concealed far more than it revealed. Hotel employees became important witnesses because many had interacted directly with the traveler. Receptionists remembered a woman who was polite, well-dressed, and confident during check-in. She attracted little attention because her behavior rarely seemed unusual. Some recalled that she preferred quieter rooms or requested changes without offering unnecessary explanations. Others remembered only brief conversations carried out in a composed manner before she disappeared into the ordinary rhythm of hotel life. None of these encounters appeared significant at the time. Only later did they become fragments of one of Norway's most enduring mysteries. Investigators noticed another subtle pattern while comparing these accounts. The woman often arrived alone, stayed for relatively short periods, and departed without creating memorable routines that might encourage lasting recognition. She blended naturally into places designed for temporary visitors, where unfamiliar faces appeared and disappeared every day. This ordinary behavior became one of her greatest advantages. Hotel staff had little reason to question a traveler who paid her bills, respected the rules, and quietly continued her journey. The absence of dramatic behavior made her increasingly difficult to trace after she was gone. By combining witness statements with registration records, detectives slowly assembled an itinerary unlike any they had expected. Each hotel confirmed another stage of the journey, yet every confirmed stop introduced a different identity. The records proved that the woman had traveled widely, but they refused to reveal the person behind the names. Instead of following one individual through Norway, investigators found themselves pursuing a sequence of carefully constructed characters. Each false identity appeared convincing long enough to complete another journey before quietly disappearing, leaving behind only ink on hotel registers and fading memories that could no longer distinguish truth from disguise. As the timeline expanded, investigators placed maps beside hotel records and began tracing the woman's movements from one city to the next. The route appeared deliberate rather than random, linking Bergen with several other locations across Norway. Distances, travel dates, and overnight stays were compared with remarkable care. Each confirmed stop strengthened confidence that the records belonged to the same traveler. Yet the purpose behind those journeys remained completely uncertain. The path itself was becoming clearer, while the reason for following it continued to disappear into unanswered questions. Witnesses added small details that official documents could never capture. Some remembered the woman speaking several languages with apparent ease, adjusting her accent depending on the conversation. Others recalled moments when she seemed friendly but emotionally reserved, willing to exchange polite words without encouraging deeper familiarity. A few described her as observant, noticing her surroundings before settling comfortably into unfamiliar places. None of these impressions proved anything on their own. Still, together they suggested someone who moved through different environments with practiced confidence, adapting naturally without ever drawing unnecessary attention. Investigators also noticed that her travel patterns rarely followed the expectations of an ordinary holiday. Some stays were unexpectedly brief, while others lasted just long enough to establish a temporary presence before another departure. At times, she appeared to revisit certain regions without leaving an obvious explanation for returning. These movements did not conclusively indicate hidden activity, but they encouraged detectives to examine the journey with greater care. The repeated changes in identity, when viewed alongside the changing locations, suggested planning that extended beyond ordinary tourism. Gradually, the investigation transformed into something resembling the reconstruction of a life that had never officially existed. Every hotel record confirmed that someone had occupied a room, signed a register, and continued traveling under another name. Yet the woman behind those signatures remained strangely unreachable. Detectives could follow her footsteps across railway stations, city streets, and hotel corridors, but they could not follow her into a stable identity. Each confirmed destination brought them physically closer to her movements, while leaving them emotionally and historically farther away from the person she truly was. The trail continued forward, but the woman at its center remained hidden behind the carefully changing faces she presented to the world. The growing collection of witness statements encouraged investigators to compare not only where the woman had traveled, but how she presented herself in different places. Receptionists, waiters, shop employees, and other casual observers described someone whose appearance remained familiar enough to recognize, yet whose personal details often shifted in subtle ways. Different names appeared on hotel registers, different nationalities were occasionally mentioned, and small pieces of conversation varied from one location to another. None of these changes attracted suspicion at the time because each individual encounter seemed perfectly ordinary on its own. Detectives carefully arranged these accounts into a chronological sequence, searching for moments where one identity appeared to end and another began. The transitions proved remarkably smooth. There was no obvious break separating one version of the traveler from the next. Instead, the changes blended naturally into the routine of constant movement. A woman could leave one hotel under a particular name and appear days later in another city carrying a different identity, while her calm manner and confident behavior remained strikingly consistent throughout the journey. This consistency became one of the investigation's most revealing observations. Names changed, written information shifted, and small personal details varied, but the witnesses often remembered similar habits. The traveler dressed neatly, behaved politely, and avoided unnecessary attention. She rarely remained in one place long enough for casual acquaintances to become lasting relationships. These recurring patterns suggested discipline rather than improvisation. Whatever purpose guided her movements, it appeared to be supported by routines that had likely been practiced many times before investigators ever began reconstructing her path. By now, detectives understood they were not merely documenting false names. They were observing a carefully maintained system of identity management. Each new registration seemed designed to function independently, revealing only enough information to complete another stage of the journey before quietly disappearing into the past. The remarkable achievement was not that the woman had traveled under several identities. It was that she had done so while leaving behind almost no confirmed connection between them. Every destination preserved a fragment of her presence, yet every fragment seemed intentionally isolated from the next, making the complete picture far more difficult to assemble than anyone had first imagined. By the conclusion of this stage of the investigation, the journey across Norway had become clearer than the identity of the traveler herself. Detectives could outline routes between cities, estimate the sequence of hotel stays, and connect witness statements with remarkable precision. Yet every completed timeline emphasized the same contradiction. The woman had moved through public spaces where countless people saw her, spoke with her, and served her, but almost no one truly knew who she was. Her movements had become visible while her identity remained carefully beyond reach. As the evidence from different cities was brought together, investigators recognized that the false names were not random inventions scattered across the country. They formed a consistent pattern of concealment that stretched through every stage of the woman's travels. Each identity appeared convincing enough to function briefly before quietly disappearing. No official record led naturally to the next one, and every attempt to verify the personal information ended with another unanswered question. The more carefully detectives reconstructed her movements, the more deliberate the concealment appeared. This realization changed the direction of the investigation once again. The search was no longer focused only on documents or locations. It began turning toward the people who had crossed paths with the mysterious traveler. Receptionists remembered conversations. Waiters recalled small habits. Other guests vaguely recognized her face without remembering a name. Individually, these memories seemed ordinary and incomplete. Together, they offered the possibility of reconstructing a personality that official records had carefully failed to preserve. Human memory, uncertain though it was, became almost as valuable as physical evidence. The unknown woman had traveled across Norway while presenting a series of identities that appeared convincing in the moment, yet vanished under investigation. Each hotel register confirmed another stop along the journey, but none revealed the person behind the signature. The trail had become broader, not simpler. Ahead lay an even more subtle challenge. Investigators would begin examining the words she spoke, the languages she used, and the impressions she left on those around her. If official documents could not uncover her true identity, perhaps the quiet details of everyday conversation would reveal the hidden life she had worked so carefully to protect. Following her trail through European hotel registers wasn't just about finding a name. It was about uncovering a pattern of discipline. She wasn't just traveling, she was managing her identity. But as detectives dove deeper into her conversations, they realized that her voice was the final barrier. How does a person move across borders, speaking multiple languages, while refusing to leave a single fingerprint on history? The woman described by witnesses rarely stood out because of her appearance alone. Instead, people remembered the way she spoke. Hotel employees, waiters, and other brief acquaintances noticed that her accent seemed difficult to identify with confidence. Some believed they heard traces of German. Others detected hints of French or another European language. No single impression remained consistent across every account. Her voice seemed familiar enough to encourage conversation, yet unusual enough to leave people uncertain about where she truly came from. Listening to her in conversation created an experience that lingered long after the words themselves were forgotten. She spoke calmly, choosing her sentences with care and avoiding unnecessary details about herself. Witnesses remembered ordinary exchanges taking place over hotel counters, in dining rooms, or while asking for simple assistance. Nothing sounded dramatic or suspicious. Even so, the rhythm of her speech and the subtle shifts in pronunciation left quiet questions behind. It was as though every conversation offered a glimpse of familiarity while gently keeping certainty just beyond reach. As investigators collected more statements, small differences between the accounts began attracting attention. One witness remembered her speaking fluent German. Another believed she preferred English during certain conversations. Others suggested that her accent seemed to change slightly depending on whom she was addressing. These observations could not be verified with complete confidence because human memory is naturally imperfect. Yet the repeated appearance of similar descriptions encouraged detectives to wonder whether these variations reflected ordinary multilingual ability or something far more deliberate. The growing collection of witness memories suggested that the woman's voice may have concealed as much as her changing names. Language often reveals pieces of a person's history through accent, vocabulary, and familiar expressions. In this case, those natural clues seemed unusually difficult to follow. Every remembered conversation offered another possibility without settling on a single origin. The investigators slowly realized they were confronting someone whose identity could not be traced through documents alone. Even the sound of her voice appeared to move carefully between certainty and mystery, inviting recognition while quietly avoiding complete understanding. Investigators returned to the witnesses with greater attention, hoping that ordinary conversations might reveal details overlooked during the first interviews. Receptionists, waiters, shopkeepers, and fellow travelers were encouraged to remember not only what the woman had said, but how she had spoken. Some recalled that she paused briefly before answering certain questions, as though choosing her words with unusual care. Others remembered that her pronunciation seemed to shift during longer conversations. None of these observations proved deception, yet together they suggested a speaker who exercised remarkable control over the way she presented herself. Several witnesses also commented on her preference for keeping conversations practical. She asked about train schedules, hotel services, or directions through the city, but rarely encouraged discussion beyond what was necessary. When questions turned toward her background, she often answered politely without providing information that invited further curiosity. This pattern appeared repeatedly in different locations. The exchanges remained friendly, yet they ended before strangers could develop any lasting familiarity with her. In busy hotels and public spaces, such behavior attracted little notice because many travelers valued privacy while away from home. The possibility that the woman spoke several languages fluently added another layer to the mystery. During the investigation, accounts suggested she communicated comfortably in more than one language, though witnesses disagreed about which language sounded most natural. For multilingual people, accents can shift slightly depending on circumstance, and investigators understood that this alone proved very little. Even so, when considered alongside the false names, the carefully managed travel records, and the absence of identification, the changing impressions of her speech became increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence alone. By comparing these conversations across different cities, detectives began recognizing a consistent pattern beneath the uncertainty. The woman rarely allowed speech to become a doorway into her personal history. Instead, language functioned as another carefully managed part of her public identity. She revealed enough to move comfortably through hotels, restaurants, and railway stations while quietly protecting whatever lay beyond those brief encounters. Her words accomplished their immediate purpose, then disappeared into memory without leaving a reliable path back to the person who had spoken them. In a case already shaped by missing identities, even ordinary conversation seemed to have become another carefully constructed layer of concealment. As witness interviews continued, investigators began paying closer attention to the woman's behavior between conversations rather than the conversations themselves. Several people recalled that she often observed her surroundings before settling into a room or taking a seat in a restaurant. These moments were subtle enough to seem ordinary at first. Travelers frequently looked around unfamiliar places. Yet when similar descriptions emerged from different locations, detectives wondered whether these quiet habits reflected simple awareness or a routine practiced through repeated experience. Employees also remembered that she carried herself with quiet confidence. She rarely appeared confused while checking into hotels or arranging transportation, even in unfamiliar cities. Her movements suggested careful preparation rather than hurried decision-making. Witnesses described someone who remained composed when plans changed, responding with calm requests instead of visible frustration. Such behavior did not make her memorable at the time. Instead, it allowed her to blend naturally into environments where self-assured travelers arrived and departed every day without attracting unnecessary attention. Another detail slowly emerged from the interviews. Although the woman interacted politely with those around her, She appeared to maintain a comfortable distance from lasting social contact. Conversations usually remained brief, courteous, and focused on immediate needs. She accepted assistance when necessary, but rarely encouraged personal familiarity beyond the moment. Detectives recognized that many independent travelers behaved in much the same way. Even so, when this pattern appeared alongside changing identities and uncertain accents, it became another quiet thread woven into the broader mystery surrounding her life. By now, investigators understood that human behavior could preserve clues just as effectively as official documents. The woman's habits, her careful speech, and her measured interactions formed a pattern that extended across multiple cities without relying on written records. None of these observations identified her nationality or explained her purpose. Instead, they revealed a person who seemed remarkably skilled at moving through public life, while revealing very little of herself. Every witness remembered something small, yet no one remembered enough to see the complete individual. The fragments remained consistent, but the person at their center continued to slip beyond clear definition, as though every encounter had been carefully shaped to leave an impression without leaving an identity. As investigators compared witness statements from different regions, they discovered that the smallest details often carried the greatest significance. A receptionist remembered the woman hesitating before writing her name. A waiter recalled that she listened carefully to nearby conversations while eating alone. Another witness believed she occasionally corrected her own pronunciation during longer exchanges. Individually, these memories seemed too slight to influence an investigation. Together, however, they suggested a traveler who remained quietly aware of the impression she created in every new place she visited. Detectives also noticed that the woman appeared remarkably skilled at adapting to different social settings. In hotels, she behaved like an experienced traveler, familiar with registration procedures and comfortable requesting practical information. In restaurants, she spoke politely with staff before returning her attention to her meal. During brief public encounters, she neither invited conversation nor discouraged it completely. This balance allowed her to move naturally through unfamiliar environments while avoiding the kind of unusual behavior that people tend to remember clearly months or years later. The investigation gradually shifted toward understanding whether these habits reflected personality or preparation. Some people naturally value privacy and choose their words carefully. Others develop similar behavior through professional experience, frequent travel, or years spent living in unfamiliar places. Detectives resisted drawing premature conclusions because the available evidence supported several interpretations. Even so, the remarkable consistency across independent witness accounts suggested that these social patterns were unlikely to be accidental. Whatever her true background, she appeared to approach every public interaction with deliberate control and quiet confidence. By the close of this phase, investigators realized that conversation itself had become another form of evidence. The woman's voice, her careful responses, and her restrained social manner all pointed towards someone who understood how easily ordinary exchanges could reveal personal history. Instead of allowing that to happen, she seemed to shape each encounter with subtle precision. The result was a trail of memories that felt authentic yet incomplete. People remembered meeting her. They remembered speaking with her. But when detectives asked the simplest questions about who she really was, every conversation faded into uncertainty, leaving behind only the unmistakable impression of someone who had mastered the quiet art of remaining unknown. By the end of these interviews, investigators possessed dozens of memories, but very few certainties. The woman had spoken with receptionists, waiters, shopkeepers, and fellow travelers across several Norwegian cities. Each conversation added another small piece to the puzzle, yet none revealed the complete person behind the carefully managed identities. Instead of uncovering a consistent nationality or background, the witness accounts reinforced a remarkable pattern. Her voice, like her travel records, seemed designed to reveal only what was necessary for the moment before quietly moving on. The investigators recognized that language had become more than a means of communication. It appeared to function as another carefully controlled part of the woman's public identity. Whether she was speaking German, English, French, or another language, she rarely allowed conversation to drift toward personal history. She answered practical questions, completed ordinary transactions, and maintained a calm, approachable manner. Yet the deeper details that usually emerge during repeated human interaction remained carefully out of reach. Every exchange accomplished its purpose while protecting the person behind the words. This realization subtly reshaped the investigation. Detectives could no longer rely solely on physical evidence, documents, or witness descriptions. They also had to consider how personality itself might have been deliberately presented. The unknown woman seemed capable of adjusting not only her name, but also the impression she left on those around her. If appearance, documents, and speech could all be managed with such consistency, then identifying her would require looking beyond the identities she created and searching for the hidden routines that connected them. The mystery had now moved beyond the valley, beyond the luggage, and beyond the names written in hotel registers. It had entered the quiet space between human memory and hidden intention. Every witness believed they had met the same woman, yet each remembered her in a slightly different way. Those differences did not weaken the investigation. Instead, they revealed just how carefully she had shaped every public encounter. Ahead, the search would expand beyond personal behavior into the wider world of Cold War Europe, where her unusual movements and concealed identity would begin to raise questions that reached far beyond the borders of Norway. Her movements weren't random. Maps overlaid with her travel history pointed toward areas of strategic military importance. The quiet life of an anonymous traveler suddenly collided with the high-stakes tension of a divided continent. The evidence shifted from the personal to the geopolitical, turning a local tragedy into an international enigma. The investigation gradually extends beyond Norway, revealing a wider European landscape shaped by the quiet pressures of the Cold War. Borders appear peaceful on maps, yet they separate political systems that view one another with constant suspicion. Military installations, naval facilities, and strategic coastlines become ordinary features of daily life across Northern Europe. Against this backdrop, the unknown woman's repeated journeys begin to attract fresh attention. Her movements no longer seem connected only to cities and hotels, but also to places carrying unusual strategic importance during that tense period. The atmosphere surrounding Europe in those years carried a quiet sense of caution that influenced everyday experience. Travelers crossed international borders beneath the watch of customs officials, passport inspectors, and security personnel who carefully observed unfamiliar faces. Railway stations echoed with different languages as business travelers, tourists, diplomats, and military officers passed through the same public spaces. Most journeys were entirely ordinary. Yet beneath those routine movements existed another world of careful observation, where information often held greater value than the people carrying it. As investigators reconsider the woman's travel history within this broader setting, certain patterns begin attracting renewed interest. Some of the locations connected to her journey lie near areas of military significance or important naval activity. On their own, these connections prove very little. Many travelers visited the same regions for completely innocent reasons. Even so, detectives begin asking whether geography itself might reveal a hidden purpose that earlier investigations had overlooked. The case quietly expands from a personal mystery into one shaped by international context rather than local circumstance alone. This broader perspective changes the way the unknown woman is viewed without changing the evidence itself. The same journeys, the same false identities, and the same carefully managed behavior now appear against the backdrop of a divided continent where intelligence work often remained invisible to ordinary citizens. No conclusion has been reached, and speculation cannot replace proof. Yet the possibility that her story belonged to a larger hidden world becomes impossible to ignore. The mystery is no longer confined to one valley or one country. It now reaches into an era where many important stories unfolded quietly, leaving behind only fragments for history to discover. As investigators explored the broader political landscape of the late 1960s and early 1970s, they found themselves working within an era shaped by quiet competition rather than open conflict. Across Europe, intelligence organizations gathered information through methods that often attracted little public attention. Diplomats, business travelers, journalists, and tourists crossed borders every day, creating a constant flow of movement that could easily conceal more discreet activities. Most of those journeys had perfectly ordinary explanations. Even so, the Cold War encouraged investigators to consider possibilities that might have seemed far less likely in a different historical period. Norway occupied a particularly significant position during those years. As a member of NATO, the country maintained strategic military installations along its coastline while sharing a northern frontier with the Soviet Union. Naval facilities, radar stations, and defense infrastructure formed part of a wider network watched closely by both Eastern and Western intelligence services. This reality did not prove that every unusual traveler held hidden motives. It simply meant that investigators could not ignore the broader environment in which the unknown woman had moved. Geography itself had become part of the investigation. Attention naturally turned toward the woman's recorded movements within Norway. Detectives compared her known travel locations with maps identifying areas of military and strategic importance. Some observers later suggested that several destinations appeared unusually close to sensitive sites, while others argued that these places were also common stops for ordinary visitors and business travelers. The distinction mattered greatly. A coincidence could easily resemble a pattern when viewed after the fact. Investigators therefore approached these comparisons with caution, recognizing that historical context could illuminate evidence but should never replace it. By expanding their perspective beyond individual witness statements and hotel records, detectives encountered a case that seemed increasingly connected to the atmosphere of its time. The unknown woman had traveled through a Europe where information carried extraordinary value and where concealed identities were not confined to novels or popular imagination. Yet despite this broader context, the investigation remained grounded in evidence rather than assumption. The Cold War provided a possible framework for understanding certain unusual features of the case, but it did not supply definitive answers. Instead, it introduced another layer of complexity, inviting investigators to ask whether the woman had merely lived during an anxious era or whether she had quietly become part of one of its hidden stories. As the case attracted wider attention, independent researchers and former investigators began comparing the woman's travel records with publicly known information about military activity during the same period. Some noticed that a number of her documented journeys placed her in regions where naval exercises, defense facilities, or strategic infrastructure were located. These observations encouraged renewed discussion, but they stopped well short of establishing proof. Busy ports and important cities naturally attracted many different kinds of travelers, making coincidence a possibility that investigators could never dismiss. Another aspect of the mystery involved the woman's remarkable ability to move across borders while leaving so few reliable traces behind. During the Cold War, international travel generally required passports, customs inspections, and official documentation. Yet the unknown woman appeared capable of crossing between countries while maintaining several carefully managed identities. Detectives examined whether this reflected exceptional planning by a private individual or something supported by a larger organization. The available evidence could not answer that question. It simply demonstrated that her movements were unusually difficult to reconstruct with complete certainty. These possibilities gradually influenced public discussion of the case. Newspapers and later documentaries explored theories suggesting intelligence connections, often pointing to the woman's changing names, multilingual ability, and travel patterns as supporting observations. Other researchers urged greater caution, arguing that each of those characteristics could also belong to an experienced traveler with entirely unrelated reasons for protecting her identity. The debate revealed an important distinction. Suspicion could inspire valuable questions, but it could not substitute for verified evidence. The mystery endured precisely because no single explanation accounted for every confirmed fact. The investigation now occupied an unusual space between documented history and unanswered possibility. Detectives possessed authentic records showing where the woman had traveled, witnesses describing how she behaved, and physical evidence collected from both the valley and her luggage. Beyond those established facts lay a wider landscape of interpretation shaped by the political tensions of the Cold War. That landscape offered intriguing connections, but few certainties. Each new theory illuminated one portion of the mystery, while casting fresh shadows over another. Rather than narrowing the search, the expanding international perspective revealed just how many different paths could emerge from the same carefully preserved evidence. As years passed, the possibility of an intelligence connection became one of the most discussed aspects of the Isdal Woman mystery. Former investigators, historians, and independent researchers revisited the evidence, comparing confirmed facts with the methods known to have been used by intelligence services during the Cold War. They noted the false identities, the multilingual ability described by witnesses, and the careful removal of identifying labels from her belongings. None of these elements proved espionage on their own, yet together they continued to encourage careful examination rather than easy dismissal. Investigators also considered how intelligence work often relied on ordinary appearances. A person staying in hotels, traveling by train, and moving between European cities could easily blend into everyday life without attracting unusual attention. Public places provided anonymity precisely because they were filled with countless ordinary travelers. If someone wished to avoid notice, appearing completely routine could be more effective than secrecy itself. This understanding encouraged detectives to reconsider earlier witness accounts through a broader historical lens, asking whether the woman's seemingly unremarkable behavior had actually been one of her greatest advantages. Even with these observations, responsible investigators remained cautious about drawing final conclusions. The Cold War produced many genuine espionage cases, but it also encouraged speculation whenever unexplained events occurred near military or political interests. Detectives recognized that unusual travel habits, multiple identities, and private behavior could arise from many different circumstances unrelated to intelligence work. The evidence supported questions, not certainty. Maintaining that distinction became essential because the strength of the investigation depended upon separating verified facts from attractive but unproven theories. By the close of this stage, the mystery had expanded beyond a single criminal investigation into a reflection of an entire historical era. The unknown woman seemed to move through a Europe where hidden activities occasionally intersected with ordinary daily life, making it difficult to distinguish coincidence from careful planning. Whether she belonged to that concealed world or merely crossed paths with it remained unresolved. What investigators had uncovered was not confirmation of espionage, but a historical setting capable of giving the mystery an entirely different dimension. The unanswered questions now reached beyond personal identity and into the quiet tensions that shaped an age defined by secrets few people were ever meant to see. By the end of this stage, the investigation had grown far beyond the boundaries of Norway. What had begun as the discovery of an unidentified woman in a remote valley had become intertwined with the political atmosphere of Cold War Europe. Yet the expansion of the case brought an unexpected consequence. Every new possibility widened the mystery instead of narrowing it. The historical setting offered context for the woman's unusual behavior, but it refused to identify her or explain the purpose behind her carefully concealed journey. Investigators found themselves balancing two equally important responsibilities. They had to remain open to the possibility that the woman had been connected to activities far beyond ordinary civilian life, while also resisting the temptation to interpret every unexplained detail through the lens of espionage. This careful balance protected the integrity of the investigation. The evidence could support thoughtful questions about intelligence work, but it could not support conclusions that extended beyond the facts already established. In a mystery shaped by missing information, restraint became as valuable as curiosity. Over time, the Isdal woman came to represent more than an unidentified traveler. She became a symbol of how history can preserve fragments while withholding the story that once connected them. Hotel records, witness memories, recovered belongings, and political context all survived the passing decades. Together, they outlined the edges of a remarkable life without revealing the person who had lived it. Each discovery illuminated one corner of the puzzle while leaving another concealed, ensuring that every generation inherited the same unanswered questions from the one before. The investigation would soon enter a different chapter altogether. Instead of relying solely on witness testimony and traditional detective work, researchers would begin turning to modern forensic science. Advances in technology promised to examine evidence that earlier investigators could never fully understand. Decades after the woman was found in Isdal, science would offer new opportunities to revisit old assumptions. The mystery itself had not changed, but the tools available to explore it had. For the first time in many years, answers that once seemed permanently beyond reach would begin to appear just slightly closer, even if certainty remained as elusive as ever. The evidence from the past has been cataloged, the theories of espionage debated, and the trail of names traced across a continent. Yet, the woman in the valley remains faceless. But the story isn't over. Decades of silence are about to be broken by the one thing that cannot lie: DNA. Modern science is reaching back into the past to extract the truth from the ashes of Isdal. The final revelation and the shocking truth behind her identity will be unveiled in just 48 hours.